has been quite telling. Going back years really in the making, there's been a culmination of really a perfect storm. You know, lack of maintenance on transmission and distribution lines, vulnerabilities in the system, a deep drought followed by high winds, which sparked extended catastrophe, wildfires. It took resulted in roughly $30 billion of liabilities to PG&E and its rate base, widespread property damage, and ultimately killed dozens of people. So now PG&E digging out of their bankruptcy, they've been awakened. This week, they've notified over 800,000 customers that they would be expected to have blackouts due to the high risk environment. What role would battery storage have played both pre and post this catastrophe? Could it have eliminated some of those risks? Could it now keep those customers online during scheduled or unscheduled outages? That's what we're here to talk about, but that's California. Who cares? What about Vermont? What are the factors here in the Northeast? We may not have wildfires every season. We do have some other examples. We've got our old friends, Sandy and Irene, that keep us honest. We have nuclear plants shipping power hundreds of miles, which are exposed to rising tides on our shorelines. We've got hydro plants exposed to climate change and variable snowpack and rainfall. We have decent reliability and availability, but we are exposed to our bulk power and transmission system. So we do have progress. I'm going to let the panelists share some of their success stories, but also what they see as the challenges ahead. So again, Kim Hayden, Director of Energy and Environment, Paul Franken-Collins, Rebecca Town, CEO of Vermont Electric Co-op, and Chris McKay, Head of Storage Solutions at WEG. They'll each provide a 6 or 8 minute presentation, and then we'll open it back for some interactive Q&A. So, Kim.
Thank you. And that was really helpful, Derek, to lay that out. So we agreed that we would not go through all of our slides. I tend to, Bill Powell is here, I tend to load up my slides with a lot of content. I've spoken a number of times at REV. I'm bringing a perspective of, you know, where are we in terms of our distributed modern grid, and where, you know, what are some opportunities that we have to kind of shift things, and particularly our power supply portfolio. So what does the legacy grid look like? It's an outdated grid with remote generation, long power lines, ultimately bringing power to the customer, and it's a one-way kind of centrally controlled and one-way system. The distributed grid, and this comes from the Grid Modernization Laboratory Consortium. It's a DOE effort that began in 2014. It's a highly distributed network, and it includes both storage, renewable energy, and controllable load. It needs to be resilient against disruptions like climate change, and it needs to offer customers choices. And importantly, customers participate in this highly distributed grid. Why now? And Derek got into this a little bit, and I prepared these slides a while ago. My daughter, by the way, lives just south of the Bay Area. I'm glad she didn't get an apartment in the Bay Area, because they are part of the area that's going to be experiencing blackouts for some, you know, it could be up to a week. So we're moving to a more distributed grid to deal with the threat of climate change and also to address climate change. Vermont's Comprehensive Energy Plan, now this goes back to 2016, we envisioned a future that would require modeling for a very high distributed energy system with rapid development of high levels of behind-the-meter generation, storage, and controllable loads. The energy plan talked about transformation of our grid and our entire power delivery system, bringing in possibly customer choice, new market players, aggregation, but also importantly said that regulatory interventions and oversight would become the main instrument for achieving these changes. So where are we today, several years later, 3 years later? We import 4 times more, 4 times as much energy as we produce within the state. Our largest utility is highly dependent on imports of hydropower and nuclear power from Millstone and Seabrook central station units that are long distances away, as is most of the hydropower. Again, this is from the FERC Form 1 for GMP 2017, or 2018, I'm sorry, speaks to concentration risks of having so much reliance on these remote resources. Seabrook and Millstone are among the 2 most vulnerable plants of nuclear units in the country subject to inundation. This was based on a lot of time and effort by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission after Fukushima. There was a study that was undertaken by staff that is referred to. It's a long name. It's the Mitigation Beyond Design Basis Events Rule. So this started about 5 years ago. Last month, the NRC adopted a rule which essentially reversed their initial reliance, or what was staff's recommendation, which was to require that some of these plants be designed to withstand the levels that are now expected from storm surges and severe inundation from rain events. I think I went back one, two. So we have, and the other important piece of this is that these 2 units, I think the Millstone unit, Green Mountain Power owns a percentage of it, and then Seabrook, we're buying about 25% of our power, at least through Green Mountain Power, from the Seabrook unit. The American Society of Civil Engineers in 2017 issued a report card that gives our T&D in this country a D+. And warned that unless we do more, we're going to be experiencing longer and more frequent power interruptions. We also, Green Mountain Power owns, and I have a mathematical error, but it's 48 megawatts of entitlements into 2 very large oil burning units in New England, again, very remote to Vermont. This slide illustrates the Hydro-Quebec transmission delivery system to Vermont that went down in the 1998 ice storm. I actually worked on that arbitration when the Vermont utilities sued Hydro-Quebec after we lost power for months. And storm events expected in the north will continue to happen as we've observed. How is Vermont's grid doing? GridWise is an independent organization that started ranking the states, I don't know, 5 years ago. And whereas we were once at number 12, the most recent GridWise 2018 ranks Vermont 20th. And they group, it's interesting, they group they're those states that just they don't think are doing anything in terms of grid modernization. And then there are others, the believers, and we're in that category because we have some regulatory policy that acknowledges the need to change, but we're not a mover and we're not a leader according to GridWise. In Vermont, because of inadequate transmission facilities, and I would say inadequate planning, the top third of the state is essentially precluding, we're precluded from putting in new generation in the top third of the state. It's called the SHEI, the Sheffield-Highgate Export Interface. And there's really no plan right now to deal with that other than not to allow new generation in that portion of the state. So what are some paths forward? I think number one that I did not put on this slide, but we need to have some very intentional distributed utility planning in the state. As the Comprehensive Energy Plan notes, it's different than integrated resource planning. We get down to a very granular level, like they are going through in Connecticut. We need to fix the SHEI. I mean, we can't have a third of the state closed to new generation. There's no reason why we need to be investing in distant, risky generation that is fossil fueled, or frankly, some of these nuclear resources that are facing potentially very significant threats. I think we need to increase the RES and promote more sustainable, renewable distributed generation in the state. We need to think hard about retail choice and third-party aggregation. And as part of that, think about promoting community microgrids or other ways to enhance distributed generation. My slides are available, I think, on the REV website. They give a lot of the citations that I didn't get into, so I'm happy to talk to you after. Oh, I'm sorry. Gotcha. Is that it?
Yes, thank you. Okay, good afternoon. Rebecca Town from Vermont Electric Co-op. And okay, good, this is us. It's a little hard to see this map, but the blue on there is the northern part of the state and shows our service territory. So Vermont Electric Cooperative, for those of you who don't know, is a distribution utility. We serve northern Vermont, primarily the rural areas of northern Vermont. So we have not a lot of density, and we also have a lot of folks who are on fixed incomes. And we are also a cooperative, which means we are a member-owned, not-for-profit, which means we have a member, our board is made up of members, and we are incredibly member-driven. So a lot of our policies and the direction we go come from the 30,000+ members who all have disparate opinions from all different areas of Vermont. And we get to take those into consideration and turn that into utility policy that works from an affordability and a reliability and a practicality standpoint. I think that's, yeah, those are the things I wanted to hit about who we are. And that now about grid modernization. So what is grid modernization? So for a long time, our mission has been reliability, affordability, safety, and that continues to be the core of who and what we are, and that is non-negotiable, that we need to deliver those things to all of our membership. But what grid modernization is asking us to deliver even more than that. So take that as a foundation and then step it up, rev it up, do more. And what that looks like now is not just affordability, reliability, and safety, but also increased resiliency, a cleaner power portfolio, and take all the grid complexity and make it incredibly simple for us. And then finally, this whole idea of flexibility. Flexibility in terms of how the power flows work, and I'll talk more about that, but also flexibility for consumers. So consumers have choice. They can make choices about how, why, when, if they want to interact with their energy, and some of them choose zero interaction. As a matter of fact, unlike the most of this room, most of our members choose minimal interaction with us. That works for them, they love it. And then a lot of them also want to drive a lot around energy choices and choose where they get their energy from, when they get their energy, and understand how it works and be part of the energy conversation. Our goal is to provide an opportunity for all of those things. I think the most important thing about grid modernization is about that flexibility, but also the way we interpret that, and the way we are able to do a lot of this is it's about location and timing of energy delivery. So it's about where you're generating and how that matches up with load, and it's about the timing of that. And that's a lot of, I was just in a grid modernization panel, and it was a timing game, right? About when your load is, where your load is, and how that's delivered at certain times of day. That sounds really simple, but it turns out it's relatively complex. One of the things about this panel, so this panel has already, we've only started this panel, but it's already been the most interesting panel I've ever been on, because unlike most panels where you have one phone call, we had 4. And the reason we had 4 is because we would start to talk about like kind of how we were going to structure this and work together. And what would happen is we would end up diving into an interesting energy conversation for 45 minutes and be like, oh, we didn't actually get done what we wanted to get done, but that was a really cool conversation. I learned some things. We had some different perspectives, and then we'd schedule another call. So we're leaving most of our time for Q&A because I hope we can continue that conversation. And so specifically, one of the things we talked about a little bit was about this location piece, and about the SHEI, and about Hydro-Quebec and in-state versus out-of-state. And I would like to challenge a little bit about what location means in terms of in-state or out-of-state. To me, to the utility, The best location is when load and generation are paired exactly together. So you are generating it and using it in the same location and hopefully at the same time. That is not necessarily the same thing as in-state and out-of-state generation. So Vermont has, Vermont is not a very big state. And so it doesn't take very far of transmission lines to get out of state. But a transmission line is a transmission line. And anything that goes by transmission line by nature, whether it's in-state or out-of-state, is not paired generation and load. So the SHEI challenge, which is that there's too much renewable generation in northern part of Vermont versus the load. The problem we've run into is that the location and the timing of all of that generation and the load is mismatched. And so that creates a challenge of location and timing that we are continuing to work on. The real way to fix that is to build more transmission lines, but that doesn't really make any sense. Mostly because our load is going down. So overall, this is our load profile of Vermont Electric Co-op, and for the next 10 years. This takes into account the fact that we will have more heat pumps. We'll have more electric vehicles. There are lots of ways that we are growing our use of electricity, but it also takes into account that we are doing really well in energy efficiency, and that net metering continues to grow, which is considered behind the meter, so it reduces our load. So with that, what this tells me is that, one, we have lots of room on our grid, and two, it is imperative that we continue to both use technology, but also think about leveraging the resources that we currently have that are in existence that continue to work for us. And that's the way that you get to a reliable, resilient grid that's also affordable. I want to talk about one project, and Chris is going to get into this more, but we went online this summer with an energy storage project in Heinsberg. This is a utility scale energy storage project. It looks pretty benign, but it's pretty cool. In about a second, it can put a megawatt of load onto the system, which is pretty neat. And what it does is basically helps us beat peaks. So when we predict that a peak is coming, then we say, hey, we want to use that battery, and then we're able to basically discharge the battery, use the energy from the battery instead of from the grid. That helps us from a financial perspective and helps from a generation perspective. Translates into real dollars for us and our membership. Also reduces those peak resources, which are often the dirtiest on the grid. And Chris will talk more about the other uses of that same battery playing in a different market. But this is just one way that we're leveraging technology to kind of get into the game, to modernize the grid and use the existing grid that we have, adding something to it, and then solving some of the problems that are created right now. And then finally, I just want to, this is a pretty high level slide, but this is actually my favorite graphic. And here's why, is because so far today, we have seen a ton of presentations, and most of those presentations have been talking about, have shown graphs or have shown technology, and we need all of those things. But the other reason we're all in this room here together today is because grid modernization is also about creativity. It is about taking all of these different ideas and coming up with something that we haven't ever done before, but maybe takes us one step forward. And so I just wanted to make a plug for all the different ideas, both on this panel and in the room, and that's what it looks like to continue to move us forward, is to pair that technology, pair those analytics with that creativity. That being said, we're a utility company, so we are really good at the analytics, and we'll continue to get even better. So we'll be using data ever more. There was a conversation earlier about AI, artificial intelligence, and we will definitely be using more artificial intelligence as the peaks get more difficult to identify. As the grid gets more complex, we're going to use a lot more data, a lot more computers to help us figure that out and perfectly time that generation and that load. And we're also going to use a lot of load management strategies. You've heard some about this today. We're continuing to explore that. The battery is one example. We're looking at behind the meter electric vehicle chargers. We're looking at behind the meter residential batteries and rolling out programs like that, looking at what it takes to time those, manage those, and use those as a flexible resource. So that modern grid really is about the flexibility both on the generation side and on the load side, and then timing those together so they work perfectly in synchronicity. And then finally, I would say it's about that blend, and this is the hard part is of using what we currently have. So sometimes I hear the grid is broken or the grid is old. Here's the thing: it's like it's pretty cool. That grid is an incredible way that we are connected together in lots of ways, and I think it does a really good job. And I also think it needs to continue to evolve just like everything that we have. And the creative part and the analytical part is all about how do you take the grid we have today and continue to use technology, use data, use creativity, and help that become the grid of tomorrow and the grid of the future to help us serve all of the needs of the people in this room. Thank you.
Afraid I was going to drink it. All right, hello, I'm Chris McKay from